And more importantly, I would say don't just stop with one lawyer, especially if that lawyer has not handled trucking accident cases themselves. Find someone that has experience doing trucking litigation, or ask the lawyer to find someone that has, because there may be a case there. There may have been federal rules or trucking standards, industry standards violated, that unless you dig a little deeper, you may not know that. I've seen it too many times, and I suspect that there are a fair number of people out there who've been involved in trucking crash cases that never pursued anything, never even bothered to talk to a lawyer, because they assumed, well, it was my fault, or wasn't the trucker's fault. And maybe it's not. Welcome back, everyone. Craig here. So today's video is going to be a little somber, but what I have to tell you is very important. So I wanted to make sure I did a video on this while it's sort of fresh. So in the last couple of days, there's been two very serious and very tragic car/truck accidents in my area. One happened south of here in Iowa, and then the other one happened just yesterday north of here in Wisconsin. Both involved very serious crashes, both involved semis, both involved fatalities, multiple fatalities, possibly. And and I wanted to sort of give people a reminder about a few things, especially if you or someone you know is in that situation, because some of this stuff that I'm going to tell you um, isn't common knowledge or isn't necessarily intuitive. So, um, so let me tell you about the one in Iowa first. So a couple days ago, one of my friends on Facebook, I grew up in Northeast Iowa, so I went to grade school and part of high school. So one of my Facebook friends posted an article about a very serious uh, truck accident that had happened not far from where I used to live. And the story was sort of just breaking. They hadn't released any names, but the basically what had happened is a pickup truck was traveling in one direction and a semi was traveling in the opposite direction. And according to the report, the pickup truck crossed the center line and there was a head-on collision, and the driver of the pickup truck was killed, not surprisingly. And I believe they said that the driver of the semi, or the truck, was pretty seriously injured. I don't know that person's condition. Um, so I was immediately, that immediately caught my attention, because, excuse me, because it was so close to where I used to live. But this is not an unusual fact pattern. Um, so the next day, my mom texted me and she said, "Did you hear that your cousin Terry was killed in a car accident?" And I said, "Did it by chance involve a semi?" And she says, "Yeah, how did you know?" And I said, "I don't know if it's the same one, but," I said, "someone had just posted on Facebook about it yesterday and they hadn't released names." And so I went and I searched, and there was some updated information, and it was in fact my cousin, my second cousin. So his dad was my grandma's brother, right? Brother and sister. And I actually used to go out and spend summers out at their farm in Northeast Iowa. And my dad had done the same thing when he was a kid. I didn't know Terry real well. He was probably 12 or 13 years older than me. But so, like, when I would go out there as a teenager, I think he was married and maybe had a couple small kids. Um, but that's just a tragic situation. And so anyway, that was story one. I'll talk about that in a moment. The other one that I heard about yesterday happened in Wisconsin, and it involved, as I understand it, a semi was traveling in one direction and a van, probably a large passenger van, like a 12 or 15 passenger van, because I think they said there was 9 people in the van. According to initial reports, the van had pulled out in front of the semi, and as you can imagine, it was a very horrific crash. The driver of the semi was killed, and I believe eight of, excuse me, I believe 8 of the 9 people in the van were killed. My wife and I were talking about that last night, thinking that could be our family. Like, that's the kind of van we drive. And we were thinking about what a tragedy it would be, like, if our son, who's out of the house, he's in the military, got the call that we had all been killed in a crash. And so that one hit pretty close to home. I still don't know the details as to who was in it. Might have been, people passing through. But anyway, so those are 2 very serious crashes involving semis. Both, at least on their face, so to speak, with the limited details, suggest that the truck drivers were without fault, and it may have been the fault of the drivers of the pickup truck or the van. I don't know. But it reminded me of a conversation I was literally having just a day before with a friend of mine who I do some business with. He works in the uh logistics of trucking. So I think they're more like arranging, they're kind of a go-between between someone that needs to have cargo shipped and the trucking companies. And so they're kind of in between. And he was telling me about a very large verdict that had come out in Minnesota. It sounds like it was on appeal, so it wasn't a recent verdict, but it was like $100 million verdict. And as I understand the basic facts, if I think about it, I'll look that up and I'll link to that story below. But it was like $100 million verdict, and according to him, the facts were that um, someone had been traveling in the opposite direction, maybe on a 4-lane road, and had lost control, crossed the center line, and crashed in front of the semi. Not surprisingly, killed a number of people inside the other vehicle. Um, and he was commenting about how sort of their initial reaction, sort of the trucking company's initial reaction, is how could it possibly be the trucker or the trucking company's fault when the truck driver was operating below the speed limit. And it struck me because um, in every trucking case that I've had, and I haven't had a ton of them, but I've had enough now. I know that's very common, and for police officers and traffic investigators to look at these, and lawyers really look at these and say, well, if the truck operator was obeying the speed limit, had the right of way, etc., then case closed. Like, there must not be any fault, and that may very well be the case, but it's not always the case. And in fact, one of the trucking accidents I had, the company tried to blame my guy for pulling out in front of this dump truck, and turned out that was completely not true. Uh, and I have another case where the trucking company and the police argued that the driver of my client's vehicle pulled out in front of this semi and caused a crash, when I'm convinced from the physical evidence and other data that that's not true at all, that the truck driver, in fact, was the cause of the crash. In that case, the police ticketed the driver of my vehicle. Um, and so the police can sometimes get it wrong. And it doesn't mean that they're sloppy or lazy, but they don't always understand how things work. And more importantly, and this is the point I wanted to get to, under federal rules, or at least trucking standards, it's expected that trucking companies will train their drivers to avoid preventable crashes. I think the term is preventable. And that standard goes above and beyond simply following the traffic laws. It's more than just driving within the speed limit. It's more than just having the right of way, but it actually requires trucking companies to be on the lookout for hazards or other drivers who maybe themselves are not paying attention or following all the laws. It actually puts a heightened burden on truckers to be alert for that, and for companies to really investigate crashes to see if there was something that could have prevented it, um, even if that required them to do something above and beyond the basic traffic rules. I know plenty of lawyers, and before I started doing trucking crash cases, I sort of view these as other just any car accident case, and sort of would have made decisions of fault probably without knowing that. And I believe that there's a fair number of lawyers that maybe don't understand that, if they just do car crashes and stuff like that, may not understand that. So the point of this video is, if God forbid you or someone you know is involved in a crash involving a commercial motor vehicle, maybe that's a bus, a semi, a dump truck, uh, straight truck, whatever the case may be, any kind of a commercial motor vehicle, don't simply accept the fact that if the police say it wasn't the trucker's fault or the trucking company's fault, please at least talk to a lawyer. It's not going to cost you anything. Go find a lawyer. And more importantly, I would say, don't just stop with one lawyer, especially if that lawyer has not handled trucking accident cases themselves. Find someone that has experience doing trucking litigation, or ask the lawyer to find someone that has, because there may be a case there. There may have been federal rules or trucking standards, industry standards violated, that unless you dig a little deeper, you may not know that. I've seen it too many times, and I suspect that there are a fair number of people out there who've been involved in trucking crash cases that never pursued anything, never even bothered to talk to a lawyer, because they assumed, well, it was my fault, or wasn't the trucker's fault. And maybe it's not. I'm not here to say that all crashes are because the trucker was at fault, or the trucking company. That's not what I'm saying. But I think there are a lot of cases where there may be a portion of fault to go to both sides. And unless you do your research and you talk to someone that's knowledgeable, you may never know that. So I want to emphasize again, these situations are very tragic, and it breaks my heart to see it happen. Um, be careful, watch out for yourself. If you're a trucker, please watch out for other vehicles. But when those tragedies happen, please consider talking to a lawyer. I don't care who it is. But do your homework, find out if they have any trucking. And if you go to someone and they say, I don't think there's a case, the police report says the trucker didn't do anything wrong, talk to someone else. Talk to a few lawyers. It doesn't even have to be someone in your state. Maybe it's someone outside a state that has more knowledge with these things, that can help find you an in-state lawyer. So want to emphasize that. If anyone has questions about that, feel free to leave a comment. If you have questions about a specific case, a specific accident case that you want to get some advice, or maybe get the name of a lawyer, don't comment. Just go to the link tree, send me an email. I know lawyers around the country, and so I may be able to help find you someone that can answer your questions. So just talk to a lawyer, do a little research, just in case there may be something that you can do in the midst of the tragedy for yourself or for your family. So thank you for listening, everyone, and until next time, have a good one.